Daramadinya Badu Wiradjuri Yawanadi Glenn Loughrey. I'm proud to be Wiradjuri man, and my name is Glenn Loughrey, and I'm an author. Glad to be with you. My most recent book is this one, which is called On Being Blackfella's Young Fella. Is Being Aboriginal Enough? It is a memoir in part. It tells my story that is relevant to the overall theme of the book, which is about Aboriginal people being okay without having to become assimilated to non-Aboriginal culture. So, well, I guess what I'm saying is Aboriginal people are okay without the descriptor of Aboriginal lawyer or Aboriginal artist or Aboriginal, which sort of gives us the idea that we're not quite there yet. We still have this little descriptor that puts us back. And what I'm suggesting in the book is we don't need that descriptor. We are who we are, and we don't have to become like everybody else just to be a human being. So I guess that's the basic premise of the book. It really follows my journey into my Aboriginality and away from my assimilated self in senses, and it talks about what Australia would look like if it took on truly a post-colonial process, because the colonial activities, the genocide, the impact upon Aboriginal people is still being felt today. We still don't have a voice to Parliament. We're still not being heard. We're being denied that. We still don't have a treaty. We're being denied that. We still haven't found a way to have practical and real truth-telling. So the book looks at what stops that, and part of that is those words, those descriptors, which say we're almost human, but we're not quite. So it's very confronting. In some senses, yes, I agree, it's confronting. But that's the story of Aboriginal people. That's our story. And I guess in writing the book, I attempted to avoid writing something that people would go, that's a lovely book. That's a nice book. You write a nice book. Because the story isn't a nice book, and the story isn't a lovely book, and the story isn't something that we just should talk about over tea and bickies. It's a real story, and people's lives have been deeply damaged by it and continue to be damaged by it, and you live with that damage every day. I wrote it for myself, so that I could begin to reconcile in myself the two parts of myself, and to reconcile the story that I've had to live. I then wrote it for those people, not for Aboriginal people, although Aboriginal people are reading it, but for non-Aboriginal people, so they would be able to begin the journey of becoming a part of this place and recognising us as the significant part of this place, that we have something to offer to them. So I guess it was about saying to non-Aboriginal people, we are real and we're still here. It's been traumatic, it's been painful, it continues to be so, and we need you to transform yourselves so you can come along on the journey with us. No, I've written two other books. I've written two other books, or been involved in two other books. One being a book that I wrote challenging the church in Australia towards an Australian church, Another Time, Another Place, which was about trying to challenge colonial institutions about finding a feet in this place. And then the third book, the book that I was involved with, is the one I'm holding here now, which is A Voice in the Wilderness, Listening to the Statement from the Heart. And it's written by Celia Kemp, who's lived for many, many years in Alice Springs, and she's taken the statement from the heart and sort of pulled it apart and talks about it, particularly in terms of how religious thought has been a part of it, and religious practice has been a part of the whole process. And my job was to illustrate the book and to provide art for the book. And it's a very, very beautiful book, and it's been well put together by the people who printed it, the Anglican Board of Mission, and it's a very, very good book. If you want a place to start to talk with family, friends, children, this is a good book to start to talk about the Statement from the Heart. No, I'm not a full-time writer. I write in between painting, being an artist, and being an Anglican priest. So I try and fill this in between the three different vocations, which I think they probably all carry much of the same kind of sense of creation in them. And I probably spend less time writing than I do on the other two. And try and get a book out a year if I can, so that we stay with some kind of continuation of ideas and thoughts. Although I found it difficult to write in 2020. I found it much easier to paint. And I think while writing is often talked about as being a solitary event, for me it is often brought about by having conversations. And I get in conversations with people and working through ideas. That's where stories and my writing comes from. So I think there was just too many other things happening for me to settle it and to do anything. I guess I write to educate myself. I think, and I'm can't remember which famous person said it about artists. It may be David Hockney, who said that an artist doesn't paint to create a picture, but paints to create himself. Okay, so in the practice of painting, you are finding new things in yourself, and you're dealing with those as part of it. And I think in for me, that's one of the really important things about writing for me, is that I begin to learn things that I hadn't seen before, and I begin to see things differently, and I begin to find and explore. It's a way for me to process what's in my head, and otherwise it just gets all confused. I guess there's, in both my writing and in my art, there's a stream of consciousness kind of approach, just letting it happen, and what happens, and then we look at it. But I rarely go back. I do in writing, because you need to go back and fix mistakes, otherwise people get grumpy. But in art, I don't go back and fix those. I allow those things to be a part and tell the part of the story that they're engaged in. They come along and they pop up, and you go, that blob shouldn't be there. But if you leave it there for 3 or 4 days and you come back and look at it and you go, well, that blob should be there because it does this in that place. Well, I've been reading a lot of stuff over the last 2020. I've been reading a lot of John Berger on art, on various books. Portraits is an excellent book. Ways of Seeing, Ways of Knowing. So I've been looking at a lot of his material, which has been really good. And Tyson Yunkaporta's book Sandtalk, from an Aboriginal point of view, is an excellent publication, and I really, really enjoyed reading that. Presently, I'm reading Braiding Sweetgrass, and I would recommend that to anybody, because it's an insight, although it's written by an Indigenous American person, or an American Indigenous person, and it tells her story and her experience as both a scientist and an Indigenous person. The similarities and the experiences and the familiarity with the Australian experience is very strong. So that's an excellent book as well. I guess Famous Five, Enid Blyton, all good Australian Indigenous authors. Biggles, I read everything that Biggles was ever written about. Biggles, it was, I don't know what that was about, but that was what I read, kind. But I also used to read a lot of, in our family, there was a lot of really ancient books about Christopher Columbus and about all of those European bigwigs. I have, in art this year, I've been a major a finalist in 3 major art prizes in 2020-21. The Paddington Art Prize, the Blake Art Prize and the Mandorla Art Prize. So that has sort of kicked me through, and I've got several exhibitions coming up. So that's all very much what I'm doing, and in some ways that's storytelling without writing words, and it's like writing, but it's in the kind of art that I do, which is very intricate and very large, takes a long time. So this year it's very much, doing that. I'm off out to the central of New South Wales in a few weeks with a water justice group to look at what's happening with water for Indigenous people, and to paint some of those stories, water stories, etc., so that we can try and get some more justice in those places. So there's quite a few things on which are all very different and interesting. I would like to do a book around my art. It's a matter of finding a publisher that will do that, but I'd like to do a book talking about why I paint, how I paint, why the Australian story is different, why Australian landscapes are very different to European ways of seeing the world. So I'd love to be able to do something like that. Yeah, the cover is excellent on this book. If you have a look at the cover, it's me in my sartorial best, without any shirt on, and it was taken by David from the Leaf Bookshop, who actually set the shoot up. And I've even had some people say some not positive things about the book, but nobody's ever said anything not positive about the cover, David.